Hi, my name is Ryan O'Connell and welcome to this training video, Deploy in Azure Backup. In this video, we are going to discuss what is an Azure Backup. We're going to deploy an Azure Backup, we're going to check the backup, and we're going to clean up some resources. Again, this video is just to give you an overview of the Azure Backup service and the Recovery Vault services. What is an Azure Backup? An Azure Backup is a service offered by Azure that you can back up data to the Azure cloud. The Azure Backup is designed to replace any existing on-prem or off-site backup solution that may be in place. Azure offers several computer components that can be downloaded and deployed to an on-prem or in-cloud VM that needs to be protected. These components are called agents, and when deployed, this depends on what's being protected. The Azure Backup service. When a backup job is initiated by the Azure Backup service, the service triggers a point-in-time snapshot by the backup extension. The Azure Backup leverages the snapshot extension in Windows and the VM Snapshot Linux extension in Linux. This extension is installed during the first VM backup, provided the VM is running. If the VM is not running at the time of the backup service instead will take a snapshot of the underlying storage of the VM. During the snapshot on a VM process, the backup service coordinates with VSS or Volume Shadow Copy service to ensure a consistent or a concise snapshot is taken of the VM. If the VM is not running at the time of the backup service instead will take a snapshot of the underlying storage of the VM. After the transfer to the vault is completed, the snapshot is removed and the recovery point is created. If the VM is off when the backup is happening, the backup will be marked as crash consistent. To fix this, start the VM and run the backup job again, and I'll show you this in the lab. It's important to note that all backup traffic from your service to the Recovery Service Vault is encrypted using Advanced Encryption 256, and the data is sent over a secure HTTPS link. Deploying an Azure Backup, the steps. The first step is the creation of the Recovery Vault. When the vault is created, it can be prepared to host backups. Once the vault is deployed and prepared, backup policies can be created and deployed. And with the policies deployed, the backups can begin. And the Microsoft Recovery Service, or MARS, or the MARS agent, is used to back up data from on-prem machines as well as VMs to back up the Recovery Service Vault in Azure. So again, the steps are pretty simple. You've got to create a Recovery Service Vault. Once the vault is created and prepared to host the backups, you then need to create your backup policies, and once your policies have been created and deployed, then you can begin the backup. And again, we will go through this step by step during our little lab. The recovery options for VMs: you can restore individual files or folders, you can restore entire disks, or you can create an entirely new virtual machine from a backup. Power BI is used to view and manage reports in Azure Backup, which is pretty cool. Regions. Because a VM is a local process, the virtual machine from one region to another region cannot be backed up to another region. And I'll say that again. Because the VM is a local process, the virtual machine from one region cannot be backed up to another region. As such, at least one Recovery Service Vault must be deployed to every region that has a VM to be backed up. So if we had VMs in region 1 and we tried to back them up to region 2, it won't work because we need to have a Recovery Service Vault in region 2, and vice versa. If we had virtual machines in region 2 and we wanted to back them up into region 1 and we didn't have a Recovery Service Vault, we wouldn't be able to back them up. So if you've got virtual machines in different regions, you need to create a Recovery Service Vault first before you can back up those virtual machines to those different regions. Again, some things to know. When you use the MARS agent to back up data, the agent takes a snapshot of the data and stores it in a local cache folder before it sends it to Azure. By default, the vault is set for geo-redundant storage. A Service Recovery Vault is a logical container that stores the backup data for each protected resource, such as an Azure VM. The Azure Backup provides application-consistent backups. Again, some of the key benefits: offload on-premise backups, independent and isolated backups, high availability with no maintenance or monitoring overheads. Azure Backup doesn't limit the amount of inbound data you transfer or charge for the data that's been transferred. You can keep your data secure, you can retain short and long-term data, and of course you have automatic storage. And there's a whole lot of more that you can do with the Azure Backup Service and the Recovery Vault services. I encourage you to go and look at the link below. The link will definitely give you more in-depth information about your Azure Backup and get you to grips with Azure Backup as well. So we're going to move over now into the portal, and we're going to go ahead and create an Azure Backup live. As you can see, I've gone ahead and logged into the portal. The first thing we want to do is create a recovery vault before we can even begin to do a backup. So I'm going to go in the search and I'm going to type in REC for Recovery Vault. I'm going to select Recovery Vault. As you can see, I already have a Recovery Vault, but let's go ahead and create a new vault by clicking the Create button. I'm going to create a new vault. I will call this NZ Recovery Vault Christchurch, and I will give the Recovery Vault the same name. I'll click Review and Create. This will go away and validate the process. I'm going to click Create, and this will go ahead and create that vault for us. This can take a few seconds to deploy, so we'll just wait while this deploys. And as you can see, deployment was successful. I can close that down, go into the notifications and dismiss those notifications. Go to Resource. So one of the things we want to do in our lab is I want to go to Properties and scroll down to the Backup section and click underneath Backup Configuration. I want to click Update, and by default there's the geo-redundant storage. And geo-redundant storage is much better than local redundant because it's robust and you definitely will protect your data. In the real world, you want geo-redundant storage enabled. I'm going to choose local redundant storage. It's cheaper, but it's not so robust. But this is a lab, so I'm not too concerned. I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button to save my settings. And I'll give it a few seconds to save. Then I'm going to close that down and move over to security settings. And in our security settings, we have soft delete enabled, and soft delete protects our data from accidental backup. But in our case, we want to delete our storage group, we want to delete our backups because this is a lab. I'm going to click the disable button and click save. And what that's going to do is that's going to disable the soft deletes so we can delete our storage. I'm going to go up to the notifications, dismiss them and click OK. And then I'm going to go back to my recovery vault. Now the next thing we want to do is create a policy. So I'm going to select backup policies. I want to add a new policy, and I want to back up a virtual machine. As you can see, we can do a file share backup, we can do an SQL server backup, but we're not worried about that. I'm going to click virtual machine. I'm going to paste the name in of my policy. I'm going to call it Backup Policy Christchurch. I'm going to change the backup time to say 8 p.m. And of course we can choose our time zone by scrolling up or down here to whatever our time zone may be. I'm just going to leave that as universal time for now. I'm going to change my policy to 7 days to how long do I want to keep the retention point for. We can also do a weekly backup. How often do we want to backup, for how many weeks? We could change that to 1 week or 36 weeks. The same with our monthly. Do we want to back up for 60 months? Do we want to back up for 36 months, 32 months, whatever the case may be? And of course, we've got a yearly backup. How long do we want to keep that backup? And we go from 1 year to 10 years. So I'm going to just turn that off. I just wanted to show you where that was. And I'm going to click Create, and this is going to go away and create that policy for us. So we'll just hold on for a few seconds while that creates. And as you can see, that policy has created. We can come up to the notification area, we can dismiss that, and we can go back to our resources, and that will take us back into our recovery vault. Again, I could scroll down and go to my backup jobs, but we don't have any backup jobs running. So what we want to do is we want to go to backup. We want to back up a virtual machine. I'm going to select my Christchurch policy. I'm going to go ahead and add my virtual machine. This is going to go away and find my VM. I'm going to select my VM and I'm going to click OK. This is going to add that virtual machine to that policy for us. And I'm going to click Enable Backup. And this is going to go along and initialize that policy for that virtual machine. Again, it'll take a few seconds to initialize, so we'll just wait while that initializes. And as you can see, that policy has gone and initialized. I can go ahead to the notification area, dismiss all of them, and go to the resource. This will take me back to my backups. If I go to backup items, you can see we've got one machine. If I double click on that, I've got a virtual machine that's telling me that the pre-check has passed. And I also get a warning saying initial backup pending. So if I double click on that, I can go ahead now and start that backup. So I'm going to go ahead and say backup now. I'm going to accept the default backup date and click OK. And this is going to go ahead and trigger that backup. And we'll just wait for a few seconds while that backup triggers. It shouldn't take at all long. And as you can see, we've got a notification here that the trigger for the backup was successful. I'll dismiss all of those notifications. I will go back into my recovery vault. And if I scroll down and go to backup jobs, and we just give it a sec, this will refresh and we should see our virtual machine showing up here shortly. And there you go, I've just done a refresh and you can see our backup jobs appearing. Just give it a second while it refreshes. There we go, it's refreshed. And if I double click on that backup, you will notice that that backup snapshot is in progress. So we'll let that carry on, and I'm going to move over to a backup that I've already created. So I'm going to type in here Recovery Service Vault. I'm going to go to the Auckland Recovery Service Vault, and I'm going to go into backup items, and I'm going to double click on my backup items. We'll just give that a second to refresh. And there we go, it's refreshed. So if I double click on that, you will be able to see I have some backups that have already completed. And we'll just give it a second. My Azure is a little bit slow, but it will refresh. We'll just wait for it to refresh. It shouldn't take too long. And as you can see there, it's refreshed. I can go ahead and stop any backups that may be running. I could also delete those backups, but going back to my backup vault, clicking on this, I can go ahead now and do a recovery. And I can go ahead now and say I want to restore a VM. If I went into my Auckland Recovery Vaults and I scroll down to my backup jobs, and we'll just give it a second, you can see I've got a whole lot of backups that were completed. If I double click on those backups, you can see that I've been backing up Windows SRV NZL02. So we'll give it a sec while this refreshes. And there you go, it's refreshed. You can see the backup was completed successfully. So I'll go back into the recovery vaults. I can click in Auckland. I can go again straight up to my backup items. We'll let that load. Double click on that. We'll let that load up. It shouldn't take too long to load. And there we go. It's loaded. It's a little bit slow today. And there we go. Now if I wanted to restore that VM, all I would do is click restore. Then I would, once I've clicked restore, I would select a restore point. So we'll just give a sec while that list refreshes. I would then select my restore point. I would click OK. I would come down here and say create a new virtual machine, and I would call this NZL-SRV-03. I will put it into the resource group. Again, I could scroll down and I could say restored VMs. I could select a network if I wanted to. I could select a location if I wanted to, where I wanted to restore that to, and I could use the same network settings if I wanted to, and I would click restore, and this would go ahead and create a new virtual machine. And as you can see, it is in progress of restoring. So I hope you are learning a little bit in this video. Like I said, it's designed to get you up and running with Azure backup. So let's close this down and move on with the lab. So So while that restore is happening, let's move over to the Christchurch Recovery Vault and see how our backup's doing. So I'm going to move over to my backup items. We'll just let that refresh. I'm going to double click on that, and there we go. We can see our backup has completed successfully, and we have a snapshot. And in the PowerPoint slides I was talking about crash consistent, and this is because that virtual machine was powered off. To fix this, all you have to do is power the virtual machine on, because remember, to create a backup it uses VSS, or volume shadow copy service. Because the machine's turned off, it can't access the volume shadow copy service, obviously, so it's using the storage to create the snapshot. So this is why we get this crash consistent message, but that is nothing to be worried about. You can just go ahead and start that virtual machine and do another backup, and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to just move back over to our service recovery vaults. I'm going to move over back to Auckland, and of course I'm going to come down to my backup jobs again. We'll just let that refresh, and we will see how far this is. So it hasn't taken too long, it's still chugging along, so I'll just pause the video and I'll get back to you shortly when that's done. And as you can see, it didn't take too long to restore, so let's go and see if our virtual machine has been restored to the restored VMs group. So I'm going to click on resource groups. I'm going to go to restored VMs, and there we go. There's our server that we've restored back to our virtual machine group. So I'm going to show you now how to delete your backups in case you may have the need to do that. So the first thing we want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and stop that VM and say yes. Then I'm going to move back over to our recovery service vault by typing RE, and I'm going to move over to our Christchurch vault. I'm going to go to backups, and we'll just give that a second to refresh. So I'm just going to move up to our backup items and just wait for a sec while that loads. It shouldn't take too long. It's just my Azure's a bit slow today for some reason. And there we go, it's finally refreshed. Let's click on that. Let's double click on this, and the first thing we want to do is say stop the backup. Then we want to come down here and say delete. Obviously we need to enter the name of that backup, so I'm going to just copy that over there, paste it into there, and I'm going to go ahead and say stop the backup. What this is going to do, it's going to stop the backup and it's going to delete that backup. So we'll give that a few seconds to run, and then we'll move on with the training video. And as you can see, it's gone ahead, and if we have a look at the notifications, it successfully stopped that. And I would move back to my Christchurch vault, and of course I would come back into my recovery service vault, and I would go ahead and delete this vault. So I'm going to select the Christchurch vault, and then I'm just going to say delete, and this will go ahead and delete that vault. I'm going to click yes to confirm, and we'll just pause the video while that vault deletes. It shouldn't take too long to delete. And there we go, it's deleted. It was really quick, and that recovery service vault has been deleted with no errors. And the same with the Auckland one. We can go over to the Auckland one, we can go to backup items, we'll just let that load. We can come to our virtual machines, we'll just let that run. We'll click on that, and of course I would come up here, stop that backup. Do I want to retain that backup? I'm going to say no, I want to delete that backup. I want to delete the backup for that server. So I'm going to highlight that, right mouse click, say copy. I'm going to paste that bad boy in there and click stop backup. And this is going to stop the backup and delete the backup, and it'll delete the once the backup's been deleted, we'll delete the vault, which will delete any storage policies that we may have in place, or any backup policies that we have in place. So we'll just wait a few seconds while this deletes as well. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and it successfully stopped and deleted that backup. I'm going to dismiss all of that. I'm going to go back into the recovery vault. And before we delete that recovery vault, I just also wanted to show you something else. You could go into your backup alerts once you have a backup. and you could go in and add custom notifications. And I could go ahead and add a custom notification by turning this on. And I'll go ahead and paste in my email address so that, and then we'll just open up Gmail and have a look. So I'll paste that in there, and I'll say what I want, critical alerts, or I want warnings, and I would click save, and that would configure that critical alert. Then if I went into my Gmail, so I'll just move over to my Gmail, and you can see there's my Gmail saying Azure functionality has been disabled. I would also get information whether a backup was successful or whether a backup had failed. So that's something pretty cool. So I thought I'd share that with you before we delete that vault. So I'm going to go ahead now and delete that recovery vault by selecting delete and selecting yes, and we'll just wait while that recovery vault deletes. And as you can see, that didn't take too long. That recovery vault was deleted successfully. Now if we move over to our resource groups, we can go ahead and delete that resource group. So I can highlight the Auckland NZ Recovery Resource Group, select copy, select delete resource group, paste that resource group in there, and select delete, and this will go away and delete that resource group for us. So we'll just wait a few seconds while that deletes, and as you can see, we have successfully deleted that Auckland resource group. I'll close that down. I will close that down, and I'll just quickly do a refresh, and as you can see, the Auckland resource group has been deleted. And we can do the same with the Christchurch resource group. We can just highlight it, copy, say delete group, and go ahead and paste that in there and select delete, and just wait a couple of seconds for that resource to deploy and delete, and we'll go from there. And as you can see, it didn't take too long to delete. We come into our notification, we'll dismiss all of our notifications, we'll close that down, and we'll do a refresh, and you can see our both of our resource groups have disappeared. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I know it has been a little bit slow with Azure. I know this video has been a little bit long, and again, I'd like to thank you for subscribing to my channel and taking the time to watch this video. And I look forward to seeing you in future videos.